Well, I guess that spirituality has always been a very difficult thing to explain. And a lot of times for people, spirituality is something that is out of the normal level of human experience. Something sometimes that they don't understand, sometimes it's something they fear. But at its best, it's something that could be described almost as a bodily sense, as a visceral thing that they have never experienced before. And often people equate that to something supernatural, something greater than what they're used to. Today we're beginning to understand that there is literally certain things you can do within your body and your brain to open up to that experience. Science maybe doesn't have necessarily a definition or an explanation to it, and that I'm all completely fine with that, because it transcends our normal experience and knowing. But there are many incidences where people say have suffered from terrible addiction, and then they have maybe a one-time spiritual experience, and there seems to be no withdrawal, and the addiction goes away. And so, of course, as often as a scientist, or some people are interested in that, but they can't always explain it. In the same way, there's a place down in Brazil with a man called John of God, and many come from all over with these terminal illnesses and cancers and disease. And lo and behold, not all, but a few have spontaneous remission of disease. And I've seen more than a few in my office, and so I see them sometimes before or sometime after, and I look for what I consider a real change, or real spiritual changes. Isn't something just superficial, something big, and many of them have that. But they realize that they open to something, they surrender in that place, and a lot of these places create an environment where that happens. I remember there was some Harvard-trained oncologists that went down, of course, and they're looking for what caused these changes in these patients, because they had patients that they had known had terminal cancer, and then they had changed, and they wanted to find out. Maybe it's in the water, maybe it's in the food, and they couldn't put their finger on it. And so often, the spiritual experience, what we define it as, is something that's beyond human description, and absolutely, of course, out of the ordinary, but it has an ability to affect real-time physiological changes too, that can lift the person out of suffering.
Well, the next question that also comes to mind is, people have expressed to me that, I had this spiritual experience, and ever since then I was saved, and God kind of healed me. And can you explain a little bit more detail about that?
So, I mean, even they can't really experience it. It's just, first of all, it's to really even to recognize that such things exist. Because, of course, in science and medicine, those are usually looked at as not important or anecdotal, unless, you're looking at Larry Dossey or somebody, that's trying to look at this or look at the power of prayer. But those studies, when done, aren't really too descriptive. But the fact is, we first must realize that such a thing's possible. And sometimes they're more superficial than really changing the person. But then there's others that they really, really have profound, like I said, changes. And I've seen it especially in areas where people are at the wit's end, or often down into deep levels of despair, often with addiction or heavy depression or anxiety, that sometimes there is almost a natural, spontaneous, almost body physiological reaction that causes them to open up to a place and have an understanding where they haven't had before.
Is that when they talk about the Kundalini experience? Because that's always seems to be out there too. About
Well, again, we're
experience.
many times in the spiritual practice, remember, a lot of these things come from very old traditions, and they didn't have words to describe things, right? And so Kundalini was described as this energy rising up the spine. Whether that's true or not, we can't really say, but what we do know that it often involves some type of an autonomic nervous system shift and change. And just the other day, I got a call from a Kundalini instructor who said that they had a patient that was a practicing member who had just been exposed to Kundalini, not at his office, but somewhere else, and she was having a terrible experience. This is very important, she was suffering anxiety, she was suffering depression, and she was experiencing feelings and sensations in the body that really frightened her, right? Now, I recognized there right away that she had what we would call an implicit memory. The Kundalini was just the movement of stimulation and energy that brought up a traumatic memory, and often traumatic memories are held out of consciousness and held in the body. And if she doesn't get the right kind of help, it cannot be good. And so her first approach is that this is a terrible thing, that Kundalini is a terrible thing, it brings up terrible things. It's bringing up bad things, but in fact, it's just bringing up some part of her that was unhealed, right? And a lot of times, spiritual experiences for people can be that, in fact, a resurfacing, believe it or not, of an implicit feeling or memory, but they're able, instead of this time shoving it down and being overwhelmed like this girl, it may possibly merge to the other side, and there's actually almost an automatic sort of a reflex in healing. But spirituality as a whole, if you look at it, it comes from an innate, I say an absolute innate thing, that it's our search for purpose and meaning. Humans get to the place and it's like, is this what life is all about? Because this isn't enough. And it comes from this longing and desire. And that longing and desire has produced some of our best and most beautiful poetry and prose and art, and has opened up people often to realize that there's a lot more in life than just about their own self or their own narcissism, that maybe there is something in the giving, right? There is a receiving in the giving.
Yeah, talk about that, because people have those experiences, and so often they've had these Christ-like experiences or this big shifts in healing, but then Steph comes back again, and we've talked about it's so important that there must be another human being there to help them to go deeper. We've talked about that before. Can you extend that a little bit more in detail with that? We've talked about that in the past.
In that, like, you're saying that...
For an example, let me see how I can clear that up. Like you were saying that God works through people. People have to reach out to others. God has no power without a human being. And that's how, that's how we experience love and compassion and healing. Because people before it says, well, if God can't get me through it, no one's going to get me through it. So in essence, you realize it all comes down to the best thing is what we do to each other. In the same way, we're seeing overwhelmingly, especially at a time of a lot of violence, that violence is almost like a virus passed down. Darkness, evil, stress, and trauma are things that are passed down. And rather than looking at it as a separate source of darkness, the evil that is trying to come in to tempt us, we see, in fact, that it's most of all, or almost all of our problems are exclusively coming from ourselves. But on the reverse of that, we can also see that the good, the best part of us is just waiting to be discovered. And that the big changes in the world come when a person realizes certain things about themselves and their lives and wants to impact other people's lives in a very positive way. And it seems, we know it has a very, very positive impact. And that's where you would see these esoteric things like love and kindness and grace and forgiveness have amazing powers to help a person. Doesn't God do all that? Doesn't He provide all that?
So it's just it's just a play on words, and like where, who, or what. You know, maybe you could say, well, it's the goodness. If we replace God with good and good with God, like I say, just add another O to it, and they're pretty much synonymous. So it's if God is working, if you want to use that word, through goodness, then it's the goodness in human beings. It's just a play on word. It doesn't matter about the theology. It's in the action that the change happens. It's in the action, and that's why it's quoted, what, two or more, two or three or more. Well, yes, and two or more can make the change, but two or more, three or more can cause horrific change, and horrific pain, and horrific abuse, and horrific illness and disease. And so, again, it's like that working through us, and that we must become more and more aware of that working through us, because otherwise the unhealed things of us, the darker things, will control us, and we will hurt ourselves and hurt others. And as one becomes, the word they often use is self-conscious, self-aware, self-realized. What is it? Self-realized means that we realize who we are, what is our inner nature, what are we controlled of, and how we're controlled, you have to understand our brain and our mind today. It's very important. And how systems like the amygdala and the fear center, limbic, because you can see how they can hijack us, but as we become more conscious, it's like something happens that propels us in a totally different way, and it becomes easier and easier. It shouldn't be always a struggle.
So that goes into my next question is, we've talked about that most people trust more the negative experiences over the positive experiences. And you also talked about people's inability to extend wonderful feelings, and some people they can't hold on to that. They go right into the negatives. Can you talk about
well, I think some of that also has to do with our brain or physiology. Like Joseph Ledoux is one of the pioneer researchers in understanding the mechanisms of fear, right? And he'll say that nature's put a very high value on not forgetting the things that hurt us, right? And fear is plugged into that. And what happens, and the problem we will also say with fear and memory is that sometimes with memory we can't remember, but also with memory sometimes we can't forget. So we can't forgive the person that hurt us. We hold on to the fear, and then fear can jeopardize and hijack our physiology. Supposedly this part of the brain, this fear center, these limbic centers, these amygdala, and then we're acting out of fear. When you're acting out of fear, it's a very self-centered and often narcissistic existence. So the best part of human beingness isn't there. The altruism isn't there. And that's why it's important, if we can help people move past that, they automatically open up into a giving, right? And those mysterious words where let the master of you be the servant, and the servant be the master. The one who serves the best, let him be first. Let him be the master. But it shouldn't be because you were taught it's good to do this.
Yes, that was.
Or people sacrifice all the time, but they don't really want to do it. It should come normal and natural, and giving should come as a spontaneous thing. And it should give you great joy, because if you give and you don't get anything in return, not on a human scale, you don't want to be looking, Jim, you're the most wonderful person, you donated $1,000 and you're so great. You already got your reward. But the reward should come inside yourself, and not because anyone else recognizes it. It's because you wake up with that person yourself every day. And as you wake up with that person, you begin to fall in love with that person again, and you begin, or maybe you never had it, and that becomes a beautiful, beautiful thing. On the contrary to that, most people, like you said, are locked into the negative, because fear is like that too. They remember the negative, and like in pain research.
Especially times of trouble, because you go good. But when you get hit with a major challenge or a stressor, you go right back. Is that what you were kind of?
You go back into fear, and people can be easily manipulated fear, as the time we're living right now. And you'll see more tragedy coming, and people being manipulated by fear, and people giving up, unfortunately, their liberties and their democracy. And so it's very important, as a person becomes more conscious and aware. They catch themselves not being hijacked or manipulated by the fear, and able to release that because they have, real-time skills and tools to do that, and they can find the inner peace. It's a big thing about the spiritual practice is to find an inner peace, whether it's sitting and meditating, whether it's sitting in church or saying prayers, whether it's sitting in Yosemite Valley and watching the sun hit the side of the rock and that golden hue and the breeze blowing across and the warm summer breeze hitting the side of your face, and you hit the ecstatic because you feel the presence of nature, you feel the presence of God in everything around you. So it's moving away from a fear-based, it's moving away from mental-based, because a lot of people sincerely are seeking, and they read and they study and this one says, well, my religion is better and my spirituality is better.
And I do this and
you should be doing mine, and you're wrong if you're doing that, but you shall know them by who they are. You shall know them by their heart. You shall know them by the light in their eyes. You'll know a truly spiritual person, even though they may not necessarily have a regular practice.
But they still don't trust. You can do good, but there's other people that they still don't trust it. They don't trust that good part.
Okay. It is what it is.
It is what it is on that. All right. What about we talk about people have expressed to me in sessions, and there was a gentleman who talked to me ever since he was younger. I'm not going to go over his name or what kind of Christianity he is, but he said that, it was told to me that I have to sacrifice myself, even though it brings me a lot of pain and suffering to help others. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So you don't have to necessarily be a Christian or Jewish to sacrifice. In fact, Dr. John Sarno used to talk about that very condition as a precursor for creating musculoskeletal pain. Somebody that sacrificed, he called it a do-goodism. Right? There's really no such word, but do-goodism, where this person is constantly sacrificing themselves for others, thinking that's what I should do, that's what I've been conditioned to do. But the inside of me is really pissed off and really mad. And he would talk that physiological response would cause an ischemic reaction, the body would contract and create pain. And once he had them realize that what they were doing and allowed them to stop, a lot of times their pain went away. It's just, again, that's an important point, because pain can be an amazing teacher. It can be there as a guide. And we have to often ask ourselves, well, why are we doing this? Where did this belief system come? And yes, I learned this from my parents, I learned this from my pastor, that you have to do this, right?
Yes.
And there should be no have to. True giving and true spirituality comes as an internal expression, and it's like knowing the real thing. When you know the real thing, you experience the thing. And we have to help people move away from that. Don't do that. Do it because it comes normal and natural, not because you think you have to, or this is a prerequisite to getting to heaven.
And then people, last question, talked about, God died for our sins, and talk about that one, because that's a thing that comes up a lot. What does that really mean?
Specific.
Yeah, what does that really
mean?
Well,
that is a specific aspect in Christianity, and it was taught for many years, in that when Yeshua, or the Christ, had come to earth, that he had sacrificed himself, and by doing this, he kind of was ending the sinful nature that was passed down from time immemorial. So it's a very difficult concept to gather, but on a more simplistic way, the information that was given was truly going to be a way for people to get out of pain and suffering, and truly was a real practical way, if you did these things without even a belief in external things, that it was a way to end the suffering. And so that's what's important. The other one is, like I said, it's it's philosophy, it's theological, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not believe it. It's like, well, what is happening in you? What are you doing in the world?
Yes.
How are you reacting to each other? If it helps you to believe that and makes you a better person, great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you don't believe that and you're a better person for it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter what the outcome. But if such a belief system, like I just was listening to a program of a new book, and it was based on stories of people throughout the ages, especially after the Roman Empire had converted to Christianity under Constantine, and his mom went searching all over the world for relics, holy relics. And so there are people like all over with hundreds of relics. I have a piece of Jesus' beard. I have milk from the Virgin Mary. I kid you not. I have a piece of the shroud. And the point about that was, if believing that or holding that or visualizing gives you a sense of greater connection, the Spirit of God, great. Whether it's actually or not, because there turns out there was like a lot of the same type of relic in different people's possession, it doesn't matter. And what matters is that you're allowing yourself to have that sense of that feeling, whether it's a certain synaptic junction of neuropeptides crossing at that time. When you start to realize it's self-generated, that's a huge thing. And that you can allow yourself, so in the prayer, or if I'm holding, or I'm praying, I'm in Turin and I'm praying before the shroud, and I get this supernatural feeling, great. Or if you're in Lourdes, and you go there, but remember, you're leaving out, millions of other people who have to visit a particular shrine, or this is where the Buddha died, or something like that. They also can have these very profound feelings, and in Islam too. So, but it's the feeling and allowing themselves to have the feeling that can be transcending to the person. That's what we want.
Well, last question, and then we'll close out the night, is when you talked about self-regulation, is that people that can get ahead and self-regulate can lock on to memory that is good. And ones that don't self-regulate remember the bad and stay stuck and forget the good. And I think you hit on that topic. Is there anything else you want to say about that?
No, it's just like today. There's an overwhelming epidemic of anxiety disorders, and it's creeping down into younger and younger individuals. So you see so many young children, with anxiety and terrible thoughts of dread and fear and death and then just no fear, no thoughts about fear, but just overwhelmed in their body, and they don't have the tools to release it. They don't have the tools to let it go, right? And as we grow and evolve as human beings, it is absolutely paramount that we build the ability to develop these soft skills within our bodies to be able to regulate our feelings and emotions. It has become so foreign today that people don't even know it exists. And unfortunately today, so many of the youth are learning to self-regulate by distraction, by dissociating. So if they're not feeling, maybe they're feeling a little uncomfortable, a little lonely, they'll pick up their mobile device, or they'll text somebody, or call somebody, or spend hours and hours in a video game. So when anxiety, which is normal and natural, and pain is normal and natural, they don't have tools, which comes with growth and development, to be able to release that. They're overwhelmed very quickly and often end up in not a good place.
Can you expand tools real quick for us? Meaning,
well, tools are varied, just like in a tool chest. I have a screwdriver, I have a drill, I have a crowbar for different tools, different jobs for different tools. And when we're talking about the inside, there's different parts of the brain that develop flexibility and access that do different things, right? And you want to be able to have the equipment by using other parts to say, oh, I'm going to use this for that and that for that. And that is absolutely accessible, absolutely important if anyone is going to be successful in life. Because the less tools they have, the more overwhelmed they have. They come by disease of all times, whether it's emotion or psychological things or physical disease, or just being able to connect to a sense of something greater, because it brings us back to that. The true spiritual experience is that there is a connection that transcends all human understanding and knowledge. And no, it's a non-educated, it's non-linear, it's non-cognitive, it frustrates the heck out of a scientist, at doctors, environment, because they wanted to narrow it down to this, a thing, a pill, a synapse. It transcends all that. Is there possibly parts of the brain that help manifest that? Sure. You have to have the equipment in order to carry the channel, but it is something unique and special that will always be so important to human nature, no matter how you try to deny it, It's there, and it comes from our need for purpose, meaning, and understanding, and our basic need as sociological and human beings to connect and to feel this, not just love at each other, but a love that transcends all human understanding.